Exploration is wired into our brains. If we can see the horizon, we want to know what's beyond. This quote from the 2009 book Magnificent Desolation, The Long Journey Home from the Moon, written by Buzz Aldrin, is one of many that speak of both space and the innate curiosity that humans possess. Since time immemorial, people have looked up at the sky and wondered if there is anything beyond what we can see. What secrets, if any, do the heavens hide? That is a question that have taken on a new form in the 20th century, when conspiracy theories about what lies beyond the stars and how that might have impacted us emerged. These theories have gained a lot of traction simply because of one simple question: what if? Welcome to part 2 of What Did the Ancients See? When it comes to conspiracy theories regarding space and possibly aliens visiting people in the distant past, many proponents have pointed to a few different places around the world. The Nazca Lines and Machu Picchu in Peru, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Easter Island in Chile, and of course, Egypt, and specifically the Pyramids of Giza. These are just a few places that have been named as places of strange things happening in the past. This theory has been dubbed the Ancient Astronauts Theory and was popularized in the 1950s. Ancient Egypt is put forth as the main location for alien visitation. It is very important to point out that this is a theory that has been heavily debated, if not outright criticized, with words like idiocy and lies often appearing. The biggest criticism about this theory is that it's rooted in racism. While I won't be going into detail about that in this video, I do felt that it was prudent to at least mention that aspect of the theory because it does come up a lot. And especially since I will be talking about Egypt, a country that has become synonymous with this theory. So much so that the government of Egypt has been forced to address it. That's how prominent that theory has become. Egypt felt like a good place to start, because there is an alleged papyrus that reportedly describes something strange seen in the sky during the 18th dynasty of Egypt, which, if true, could potentially be one of the earliest accounts, if not the earliest account, of something strange seen in the sky. So let's take a look at it. Thutmose III, or Thutmose the Great, was the 5th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt, reigning for 54 years between 1479 and 1425 BC. And it was supposedly during his reign that something strange would be recorded in what is known as the Tully Papyrus. The story goes that in 1933, a curator of the Egyptology department of the Vatican Museums named Alberto Tully discovered a strange roll of papyrus. Not much is known about the papyrus after that, not until 20 years later in 1953, when an Italian Egyptologist, Boris de Rachevils, claimed to have discovered the original copy of the papyrus among Alberto Tully's papers. Tully had since passed away. The papyrus supposedly speaks of a strange disk that were seen approaching in the sky. The scribes of the House of Life spotted a circle of fire approaching in the sky. This disk is described almost like a creature. It had no head, but still emitted an unpleasant odor from what was described as its mouth. It was roughly 50 meters or 164 feet long and 5 meters or 16 feet wide, and it was seen moving towards the king's house. The scribes would go to the king to report what they had seen. The king would then order them to consult with the scrolls that were located in the House of Life, while he meditated on all of these events. Several days would reportedly pass with more of these circles of fire appearing in the sky. They allegedly glowed brighter than the sun. So much so that the king would go out with his army to observe these circles of fire. As they did, these circles would float higher and higher in the sky to the south before they disappeared. And when they did, fish and other volatiles would rain down from the sky. The passage in the papyrus reportedly ends with the king ordering the scribes to record this event into the scrolls so that they could be remembered forever. While the Tully Papyrus is interesting, it does have its share of problems, which we will get into later in the video. But there are ancient sightings of strange things seen in the sky that has also been brought up in discussions about what did the ancients see. And those are often backed up by more reputable people. The current oldest recorded sighting of something in the sky comes from the year 218 BC by Roman historian Titus Livius, better known in English as Livy. He describes a portent, a bad omen, of phantom ships that had been seen gleaming in the sky during the wintertime in the war between the Carthaginians and Rome. Livy would also go on to list other portents in the text, such as apparitions of men in shining raiment appearing in the distance, that a wolf had snatched a sentry's sword from its scabbard and run off with it in Gaul, and so on. But that brief mention would not be the last time the Romans reportedly saw something in the sky. Another famous account comes from Pliny the Elder, who in 76 BC describes a strange sighting in the sky in his work The Natural History. He writes, "We have an account of a spark falling from a star and increasing as it approached the earth until it became the size of the moon, shining as through a cloud. It afterwards returned to the heavens and was converted into a lampus. This occurred in the consulship of Gnaeus Octavius and Gaius Scribonius. It was seen by Silanus, the proconsul, and his attendants." Pliny the Elder is also a pretty notable figure in Roman history, and the people mentioned here are also notable figures. Octavius was a Roman senator, Scribonius was a Roman statesman, and a famous orator, both notable figures in Roman society. Silanus was a governor in the province of Asia in 76 BC, which is probably where this incident supposedly occurred. And interestingly enough, there's also a brief report of a candle star in China that same year, 76 BC, though it's theorized that these were two separate events. More well-known figures like philosopher Plutarch and historian Cassius Dio would report strange things in the sky. Plutarch reported that during a battle, the sky burst asunder and a huge flame-like body was seen to fall between the two armies. He described the shape of this object as similar to a wine jar, and this supposedly happened somewhere between 73 to 74 BC. Cassius Dio would write in 196 AD that fine rain resembling silver descended from a clear sky upon the forum of Augustus. Let's start with the Tully Papyrus. While the story that's supposedly found in the text is interesting to say the least, The papyrus itself has been lost, with the only records of it being notes that were supposedly taken by Alberto Tully. Rutschewild would reportedly admit to Tully's successor, Gianfranco Nolli, that he had actually never seen the papyrus himself. His translation was based entirely on the notes that were taken by Tully in 1934. And those notes were apparently taken by Tully while he had been viewing this papyrus for a short time at the home of someone called Tano while in Cairo, Egypt. Nolli would conclude based on this that his predecessor, Tully, had been fooled by a fake, which in turn meant that his notes that he took of this fake papyrus would fool Rutschewild and people afterwards. In the Analecta Papyrologica, which is a report looking into the Tully papyrus, it says that the original claim originated in a letter published by Tiffany Thayer in Doubt, the Fortean Society magazine, and that's the source for the whole thing. Boris de Rutschewild would reportedly go on to say that this account of him finding a copy of the papyrus was entirely fabricated, that he had never seen the papyrus, he only saw the notes. Still, people would become more interested in this papyrus when it was mentioned in the Condon report from 1968. This was a report made by the Condon Committee, which was a group funded by the United States Air Force from 1966 to 1968 at the University of Colorado. Their mission was to study unidentified flying objects under the direction of physicist Edward Condon, hence the name. This report took a very critical stance towards the subject of UFOs, something that it, in turn, has been criticized for. Criticisms including the fact that this report only studied a select few cases, that it omitted certain details, and so on. So because of that, it's safe to say that the Condon report was controversial in and of itself. But what does it say of the Tully papyrus? Well, writer Samuel Rosenberg writes in the Condon report that this papyrus seems like plagiarism, that the papyrus itself has been plagiarized from the Book of Ezekiel. He writes that the two works are supposedly similar in style, language, and detail. So much so that he questioned if the Tully papyrus had been taken from the King James's version of the Book of Ezekiel. However, Rosenberg does present the idea that if the Tully papyrus is genuine and has been accurately translated, it might be possible that it's the other way around, that the Book of Ezekiel have taken some ideas from this papyrus. But as it stands, the exact details are considered impossible to confirm due to transcription errors. Not to mention the fact that it comes from an ancient text that has seemingly been lost and has only been viewed by someone who is long gone. That, in combination with people giving conflicting reports, it becomes all the more difficult to view it as a credible source, no matter how interesting the subject matter may be. As for the accounts from the Roman and Greek writers, we do know that these sources exist. We have the works and we have the names of the writers. But they are still debated, and that debate is whether or not the translations are correct, not just in terms of language, but also in terms of meaning. How reliable can we consider these texts to be? Can we take these texts literally, or is there some metaphorical meaning behind them? For instance, the most well-known Greek historian is Herodotus, who is one of the biggest sources for things in ancient times, if not the only source at times. But he has been criticized by both contemporary and current writers, with the biggest criticism aimed at him being that he had a tendency to make things up to make it more interesting. So how does any of this relate to the Roman accounts of strange things seen in the sky? Well, from what I could find, the general consensus seems to be that these sightings were either one or two factors, possibly a combination of both. namely religious beliefs and practices versus the misunderstanding of natural phenomena. The Romans were a highly religious society that believed that their success were due to having good relations with the gods. Belief in spirituality had a strong connection with the ruling parties. For instance, omens that were observed, like the flight of birds, were believed to have been sent by the gods in response to official queries. If a magistrate with the right of augury deemed the omens unfavorable, he could declare the suspension of all official business for the day. Prodigies were signs of divine anger that preceded conflict and misfortune. The Senate had the authority to decide whether a reported prodigy was false or genuine, and if it was in the public interest. If they deemed that it was, the matter would then be referred to the public priests, augurs, and diviners for ritual atonement. Livy's account of phantom ships flying through the sky has been interpreted by historians as reactions to an unfolding military crisis at the time. That his text was evidence of the failings of Roman religio, the duty and moral obligation both in mundane and religious contexts. So, some have theorized that Livy's account was not a sighting in the literal sense, but rather a spiritual or symbolic one. The account from Pliny the Elder is believed to be the later category, a misunderstanding of natural phenomena, specifically a bolide, which is an exceptionally bright meteor that might explode in the atmosphere. Ironically, the first usage of the term bolide comes from Pliny himself in his Natural History. He used the word as one of several terms describing prodigies in the heavens, which has made people theorize that maybe he meant it in two ways. And if you're wondering what a bolide is, it's not the same as a meteoroid. A meteoroid is generally defined as an asteroid or a comet fragment that orbits the sun. The shooting star phenomenon are the visible paths of meteoroids that have entered the Earth's atmosphere at high velocities. Another word for a bolide is a fireball that exploded in the atmosphere. Astronomers use the word to describe any extremely bright meteor, and geologists use the word to describe a very large impact event. I can give you two examples of this. Scientific consensus agrees that a bolide is what led to the extinction of all non-avian dinosaurs. And another example is the Tunguska event in 1908, which is believed to have been caused by a super bolide. And of course, I can't ignore this theory, so we have to talk about it, at least briefly. The u.f.o theory, which is actually more straightforward. What the ancients saw was a ship, either taking off or landing, glowing brightly as they enter or leave the atmosphere, with the strange odor mentioned in the Tully Papyrus simply being the exhaust of the ship. There isn't much to say about this particular theory without entering the rabbit hole that is the ancient astronauts theory, which is considered pseudo-scientific with quite a lot of criticism aimed at it, which I already mentioned in the beginning of the video. The idea that reported UFO sightings date back to the time of the Romans is a fascinating one. But the problems with many of these reports is the jumping between metaphors and what may be accurate descriptions of events. Astronomer and planetary scientist Richard Stothers writes in his article Unidentified Flying Objects in Classical Antiquity that it is accordingly impossible to know whether the later observers, mostly practical Romans, interpreted the phenomena literally as they described them, or were simply using the best descriptive language that they were capable of, while holding back on theoretical speculation. It's difficult to discern which is which. I touched on this briefly in the previous video, as this is an argument that could be applied to almost all historical writing. Where does the actual description stop and the metaphor begin? In the end, the only thing we can say for certain is that regardless of what they saw, the idea that for more than 2 millennia, people have looked at the sky and seen things that they could not identify is fascinating. The question asked in both the title of this video and in the beginning of it is not meant to be a literal one, because it's not a question we can answer with certainty. Stothers ends his article by writing that what we call UFOs today possesses an intrinsic interest transcending the passage of time and the increase of human knowledge. This also harkens back to the Buzz Aldrin quote in the beginning of the video. Humans are an innately curious species. Exploration is wired into us. For thousands of years, people have wondered what secret the heavens held. And for thousands of years, people have reported seeing something in the sky. What do you think it was?